Chapter 4. Yeerks. The twin red lights slowed. They turned in a circle and came back toward us. There is no more time. You must decide. We have to do this, Tobias said. How else can we fight these controllers? This is so insane, Marco said. Insane. I'd like more time, but we don't have that choice, Rachel said. I'm for it. What do you say, Jake? Cassie asked me. It was odd, like suddenly I was the one who had to decide for everyone. I looked up at the Yeerks ships. What had the Andalite called them? Bug fighters? They were circling closer, like dogs sniffing for a scent. I looked down at the Andalite and remembered the picture of his family. Would they even know what had happened to him? I looked at each of the people around me. My usually funny, occasionally annoying best friend Marco, Rachel, my smart, pretty, confident cousin, and Cassie, who everyone knew liked animals more than she liked people. Finally, I looked at Tobias. It was weird, the feeling I had at that moment staring at him, a chill or something. We have to, Tobias said to me. Slowly, I nodded. Yes, we have no choice. Then each of you, press your hand against one of the sides of the square. We did. 5 hands each pressed against one side, then a 6th hand, different from ours, with too many fingers. Do not be afraid, the Andalite said. Something like a shock, only pleasurable, seemed to run through me, a tingle that almost made me laugh. Go now, the Andalite said. Only remember this. Never remain in animal form for more than 2 of your Earth hours. Never. That is the greatest danger of the morphing. If you stay longer than 2 hours, you will be trapped, unable to return to human form. 2 hours? I repeated. Suddenly, some new fear washed through the Andalite's mind. Linked as I was to him, I could feel it as a dread that crawled up my spine. He was staring up at the sky with his main eyes. Something else was up there with the bug fighters. Visser 3, he comes. What? I was shaking with a new terror. What's a Visser? Who's a Visser? Go now, run. Visser 3 is here. He is the most deadly of our enemies. Of all Yeerks, he alone has the power to morph, the same power you now have. Run. No, we'll stay with you, Rachel said firmly. Maybe we can help. Again, it was as if the alien was smiling at us with his eyes. No, you must save yourselves. Save yourselves and save your planet. The Yeerks are here. We all looked up, craning our necks. Sure enough, the 2 red lights were sinking toward us, and they had been joined by a 3rd ship, far larger, black as a shadow within a shadow. But how are we supposed to fight these controllers? Rachel demanded. You must find a way. Now run. I jerked from the force of his command. He's right. Run, I yelled. We ran, all but Tobias, who knelt beside the Andalite and took his hand. The Andalite pressed his other hand against Tobias's head. Tobias rocked back like he had been shocked. Then he too was up and running, stumbling over the loose junk and potholes of the construction site. A beam of red light snapped on. It was a spotlight from one of the bug fighters. The beam lit up the fallen Andalite and his ship. A spotlight from the 2nd bug fighter joined the 1st, and the Andalite shone brilliant as a star. I hit the dirt hard. I saw my leg lit up within the circle of that spotlight. I yanked it to me and crawled fast, scraping my elbows and knees over sharp stones. The 5 of us crouched behind a low, crumbled wall, afraid to move, afraid to look, but just as afraid to look away. Slowly, the bug fighters descended. It is easy to see where they had gotten their nickname. They were slightly larger than the Andalite fighter and shaped like legless cockroaches. There were small windows like eyes on the forward thrust head of the bug, and on either side of the head were 2 very long, very sharp, serrated spears. The Yeerk bug fighters touched down, one on either side of the Andalite ship. Okay, you can wake me up now, Marco said in a rattled whisper. I've had enough of this dream. The larger ship began to descend. I don't know what it was about that ship, but as it got closer, I started to feel like I couldn't breathe. I tried to suck in a deep lungful of air and couldn't. I tried to swallow and couldn't. I wanted to run, but my legs were jelly. I was shaking from a fear so deep it was like nothing I had ever experienced before. It was the same fear that the Andalite had shown when he'd realized Visser 3 was coming. The ship settled towards the ground. It looked like it was going to land directly on a big rusted earth mover parked there. But as the Visser's ship descended, the earth mover just sizzled and disappeared. Visser 3's ship was built like some ancient weapon. It reminded me of one of those battle axes the old-time knights used when they were hacking off heads of their foes. There was a main part, like the handle of the axe with a big triangular point on the front. That part had to be the bridge. At the end were two huge scimitar wings. It was 8 or 10 times the size of the bug fighters. The blade ship landed. A door opened. Cassie started to scream. I clamped my hand over her mouth. They leaped from the ship, whirling and thrusting and slicing the air, creatures that looked like walking weapons. They stood on 2 bent-back legs and had 2 very long arms. On each arm there were curved horn blades growing out of the wrist and elbow. There were other blades at their bent-back knees, and 2 more blades at the end of their tails. They had feet like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. But it was the head that got your attention, a neck like a snake, a mouth that was almost a falcon's beak, and from the forehead, 3 dagger-like horns raked forward. Hork-Bajir controllers. I jumped hearing the Andalite's words in my mind again. They were fainter than before, strained, like someone yelling from far away. Did you guys? I asked. Rachel nodded. Yeah, the Hork-Bajir are good people, despite their fearsome looks, the Andalite said. But they have been enslaved by the Yeerks. Each of them now carries a Yeerk in his head. They are to be pitied. Pity, right, Rachel said grimly. They're walking killing machines. Look at them. But our attention was drawn away by a new form that crept and slithered and shimmied out of the blade ship. Taxon controllers, the Andalite said. I knew he was trying to tell us all he could, even to the end, trying to prepare us for what we were up against. The Taxons are evil. Yeah, Marco muttered. I think I would have guessed that. They were like massive centipedes, twice as long as a grown man, so big around that even if you tried to hug one, your arms wouldn't make it even halfway. Not that anyone would ever want to. They had dozens of legs that supported the lower 2/3 of their body. The top third was held upright, and there the rows of legs became smaller, with little lobster claw hands. Around the top of their disgusting tubular bodies were 4 eyes, each like a wiggling glob of red jello, and at the very end, pointing straight up in the air, was a round mouth ringed by hundreds of tiny teeth. Hork-Bajir and Taxons poured from the blade ship, spreading out around the area like well-trained Marines. They were holding small pistol-sized things that were definitely weapons. They formed a ring around the Andalite and his ship. Suddenly, one of the Hork-Bajir came straight toward us. He took one big, bounding step and was practically on top of us. I hugged the dirt like it was my last hope. I wished I could dig a hole. I saw a flash of Marco's face. His eyes were huge. His lips were drawn back in what could have been a grin, except that I knew it was an expression of pure terror. Chapter 5. The Hork-Bajir pointed his gun, or whatever it was, around the darkness. His snake head swerved left and right, trying to penetrate the gloom. Silence, the Andalite warned us. Hork-Bajir do not see well in darkness, but their hearing is very good. The Hork-Bajir moved closer still. He was 6 feet away now, with just the low wall between us. He had to have heard my heart pounding. Maybe he didn't know what that sound was. Maybe he didn't recognize the sound of 5 terrified kids whose knees were quivering and teeth were chattering. Kids who were breathing in short, sudden gasps. As I was sure I was going to die, right then, I could see in my mind the way those vicious wrist and elbow blades were going to slice my head from my body. If you've never been really afraid, let me tell you, it does things to you. It takes over your mind and your body. You want to scream. You want to run. You want to wet your pants. You want to throw yourself down on the ground and cry and beg, please, 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 please don't kill me. And if you think you're brave, well, wait till you're cowering a few feet away from a monster who can turn you into coleslaw in about 3 seconds flat. But then the Andalite's voice was in my head again. Courage, my friends. And this warm, I don't have any words to explain it. It was just this warmth that spread all through me. It was like when you're a little kid and you've had a terrible nightmare and you could have woken up screaming. You know how you used to feel better when your mom or dad would turn the lights on and come in and sit beside your bed? That's what it was like. I mean, I was still terrified. The Hork-Bajir was still there, so real and so deadly. I could hear him breathing. I could smell him. But at the same time, I could feel the panic coming under control. I could feel the strength flowing from the doomed Andalite. He was letting us borrow some of his courage, even though he must have been afraid himself. The Hork-Bajir moved away. Something new was coming from the blade ship. Shaking and chattering, I rose high enough to look over the low wall. Every Hork-Bajir and every taxon was turned toward the ship now. They're all standing at attention, I whispered. How can you tell? Marco whispered back. Who knows when a jelly-eyed centipede or a walking salad shooter from hell is standing at attention? Then he appeared. Visser 3, the Andalite said. Visser 3 was an Andalite. Or at least he was an Andalite controller. What the? Rachel said. Isn't that an Andalite? Only once has a Yeerk been able to take an Andalite's body, the Andalite said. There is only one Andalite controller. That one is Visser 3. Visser 3 walked confidently toward the wounded Andalite. The Visser seemed so much like the Andalite it was hard to tell them apart at first. He had the same mouthless face, the same extra stalk eyes that turned here and there, checking out everything in all directions, the same powerful yet sleek four-legged body, and that same wicked tail. But if the Visser looked like any normal Andalite, he felt different. It was like he was wearing a mask, only you just knew that under the fake sweetness of the mask there was something twisted and foul. Well, well, Visser 3 said. I almost had a heart attack when I realized I was hearing the Visser's thoughts. Can he hear our thoughts? Cassie whispered. If he can, we're so dead I don't even want to think about it, Rachel told her. He cannot hear your thoughts, the Andalite said, as long as you don't direct them to him. You hear his thoughts because he is broadcasting them for all to hear. This is a great victory for him, so he wants all to hear. What have we here? A meddling Andalite? Visser 3 looked more closely at the Andalite ship. Ah, but no ordinary Andalite warrior. Prince Elfangor Serenial Shamto, if I'm not mistaken. An honor to meet you. You're a legend. How many of our fighters have you shredded? 7? Or was it 8 by the time the battle ended? The Andalite didn't answer, but I had the feeling maybe it had been more than 8. The very last Andalite in this sector of space. Yes, I'm afraid your doomed ship has been completely destroyed. Completely. I watched it burn as it fell into the atmosphere of this little world. There will be others, the Andalite prince said. The Visser took a step closer to the Andalite. Yes, and when they come, it will be too late. This world will be mine, my own contribution to the Yeerk Empire, our greatest conquest, and then I'll be Visser 1. What do you want with these humans? The Andalite asked. You have your Taxon allies, you have your Hork-Bajir slaves, and other slaves from other worlds. Why these people? Because there are too many, and they are so weak, Visser 3 sneered. Billions of bodies, and they have no idea what's happening. With this many hosts, we can spread throughout the universe. Unstoppable. Billions of us. We'll have to build 1,000 new Yeerk pools just to raise Yeerks for half this number of bodies. Face it, Andalite. You have fought well and bravely, but you have lost. Visser 3 stepped right up to the Andalite. I could feel the Andalite's fear, but rather than cower, he fought the pain of his wound and climbed to his feet. He knew he was going to die. He wanted to die on his feet, looking his enemy in the face. But Visser 3 was not done taunting his foe. I promise you one thing, Prince Elfangor. When we have this planet with its rich harvests of bodies, we will move against the Andalites' home world. I will personally hunt down your family, and I will personally oversee the placement of my most faithful lieutenants in their heads. I hope they will resist, so I can hear their minds scream. The Andalite struck. His tail whipped up and over, so fast you really couldn't see it. The Visser twisted his head aside. The Andalite's tail blade missed the Visser's head by bare half an inch, but it sliced into his shoulder. Blood, or something like blood, sprayed from his wound. Yes, I hissed. Ah! I could hear the Visser's howl of pain in my head. At the same time, a blinding beam of blue light shot from the tail of the Andalite ship. It sliced into the nearest bug fighter. Hork-Bajir and Taxon scattered. Even crouched behind a wall, I could feel a wave of blistering heat. The bug fighters sizzled and disappeared. Fire! Visser 3 yelled. Burn his ship! The night exploded in blinding light. Red beams lanced from the blade ship and the remaining bug fighter. The Andalite ship glowed and with a strange slowness, disintegrated. Then, in the flashing glow of Dracon beams I saw, or thought I saw, humans, a small group of them, maybe 3 or 4, back in the shadows behind the Visser. There are people over there, I told Marco. What? Are they prisoners? Take the Andalite, Visser 3 ordered his soldiers. Hold him for me. 3 big Hork Bajar grabbed the Andalite and held him down. Their wrist blades were at his throat, but they knew better than to kill him. It was to be Visser 3's personal privilege. Then we saw why a Yeerk as powerful as Visser 3 would inhabit the only captured Andalite body. As we watched, Visser 3 began to morph. His Andalite head grew larger, much larger. The 4 horse-like legs merged into 2 and then expanded, each leg becoming as big around as a redwood tree. The delicate Andalite arms sprouted and became tentacles. This isn't real, Cassie whispered. This isn't real. In the hideously bloated head, a mouth appeared. It was filled with teeth as long as your arm. The mouth grew wider and wider, becoming a monstrous, terrifying grin. There was nothing left of the Andalite body. A monster had taken its place. Roar! The roar of the beast Visser 3 had become made the ground shake. I covered my ears with my hands. Roar! My teeth rattled from the sound. I heard someone whimpering. It was me. Visser 3 had become a monster that made the Hork Bajar and Taxons look like harmless toys. He reached out with one thick tentacle and grabbed the Andalite by the neck. No, 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 I heard Cassie whispering over and over again. No, 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 no. Don't look, Rachel said to her. She put her arm around Cassie's shoulder and held her close. Then she reached for Tobias and took his hand. I guess you never really know someone till you see them scared. And even scared to death, with tears running down her face, Rachel had strength to spare. Visser 3 lifted the Andalite straight up in the air, tearing him from the grasp of the Hork Bajar. The Andalite prince struck again and again with his tail, but each strike was like a pinprick against such a creature. Visser 3 held the Andalite high in the air, and then Visser 3 opened his mouth wide. Chapter 6. I don't know what came over me right then. I had been so afraid, so terrified, but it was like something just snapped in my head. I couldn't just hide and watch. I couldn't. You filthy! I jumped to my feet. I snatched up a piece of rusted iron pipe from the ground and started to climb over that wall. I guess I just went crazy or something. It had to be craziness, because there was no way that I, alone, armed with a piece of pipe, was going to accomplish anything. No! The Andalite's silent cry made me hesitate. I felt Marco's hand grabbing at my shirt and pulling me back. Tobias and Marco held me down. Rachel put her hand over my mouth. I was trying to scream, or curse, or something. Shut up, you idiot, Marco hissed. You're going to get us all killed. Jake, don't. Cassie put her hand on my cheek. He doesn't want you to die for him. Don't you realize? He's dying for us. I shoved Marco and Tobias away angrily, but I was in control of myself again. I peeked over the wall again. The Andalite prince was helpless in the grasp of Visser 3. I saw him held high in the air. I saw Visser 3 open his monstrous, gaping jaws. I saw the Andalite fall into that open mouth. The mouth closed. The teeth ripped the Andalite apart. And the Andalite prince, Elfangor Serenial Shamtul, dead. At the very end, he cried out. His cry of despair was in our heads. His cry will always be in our heads. The Hork Bajar controllers began making a huffing sound, like, ho, ho, ho. Maybe they were laughing or applauding. The Taxon controllers rushed forward and crowded around Visser 3. They seemed to be stretching up towards him, and then I saw why. A piece of the Andalite fell from the Visser's jaws, and the nearest Taxon greedily gobbled it up. Tobias turned away and covered his face with his hands. Cassie had tears streaming from her eyes. So did I. I heard a sound that was strange because it was so normal. It was laughter. Human laughter. The humans, the human controllers, because that's what they were laughing, like they were at some kind of a show. For a moment it seemed to me that one of those laughing voices was familiar, like I heard it before, but then the sound was swallowed up in the huffing of the Hork Bajar. Visser 3 morphed out of his monstrous form and slowly regained his Andalite body. Ah, I heard him think. Nothing like a good Antarian bog morph. Again the human controllers laughed, and the Hork-Bajar controllers huffed, and I heard a familiar human laugh I could not quite place. Marco started throwing up. It was an understandable thing to do, but somehow that sound caught the attention of the nearest Hork-Bajar. The snake head turned. He was perfectly still. We were perfectly still. The Hork-Bajar turned toward us. The nearsighted eyes were aimed directly at our little hiding place. I don't know who panicked first. Maybe it was me. Maybe we'd all just had all the fear and horror we could stand. It was like an electric shock went through us all. We were running before I had a chance to even know what I was doing. I ran. I gasped for air. A cry went up from the Hork-Bajar. "Split up," I yelled. "They can't follow all of us." Marco and Tobias and Cassie took off in 3 different directions. Rachel was still right beside me. Glancing back, I saw the Hork-Bajar hesitate, unsure of who to chase. Rachel and I are the fastest runners. Tobias is totally out of shape, and Marco and Cassie are too short to be really fast. So I figured if the aliens were going to chase anyone, it ought to be us. I guess Rachel thought the same thing. She slowed down just a little and began yelling and waving her arms. Come on, you!" And then she said some words I didn't realize Rachel even knew. The 2 nearest Hork-Bajars snapped around and took after us. "Garfrosh, here! Garfrosh, fit! Enemy, get!" Even in my panic, it surprised me. They were talking some mix of their own alien language and ours. "Garfarsh, fit! Nahar! I get! I kill!" I ran. Suddenly my foot slammed something and I was down. I hit the ground hard. The wind was knocked out of me. I tried to fill my lungs again. Rachel ran on. She didn't know I had fallen. A spear of light struck the concrete pipe just beside me. The concrete vaporized. The 2 Hork-Bajar were coming after us, bounding like some devil kangaroos. I was up and running. Rachel must have realized I wasn't with her anymore. She stopped and started to come back towards me. "Don't be an idiot," I yelled. "Run!" She hesitated just a second, but she knew she couldn't do anything more for me. She ran. I saw a dark hole ahead and raced towards it. A doorway. Inside it was as black as a grave. It was one of the buildings that had almost been completed, just bare concrete walls and scattered junk, but I knew I had been in here before. Marco and I had walked all through it. There were hallways and little side rooms. It was like a maze. Marco, Rachel, had they gotten away? And what about Cassie and Tobias? I tried to get my brain to concentrate as I scurried across the first big room. There was a corridor, somewhere. I groped in the dark and found a wall. I heard the sound of claw-like feet, huge, tearing, rending claw feet, scraping over the bare concrete. A bottle went skimpering across the floor. The Hork-Bajar were close. And in the total darkness, my superior human vision wasn't much use, but I knew my way around the empty building. At least, I would have known my way around if my brain had been working. I felt my hand go into emptiness. A doorway, yes. It led down a hallway. I went through just as the light came on behind me. Someone had brought a flashlight. F no, to tell flashy, nuff what fit, whatever order. No need to capture them. Whoever you find, kill. The first voice had been Hork-Bajar. The second voice was human. And the weird thing was that human voice sounded familiar. I tried to think. I knew I had heard that voice somewhere. Where? Just save the head, the human told the Hork-Bajar. Bring that head to me and we can identify it. I slid quickly along the wall. The light followed just steps behind me. I racked my brains. Had there been a passageway? Yes, there it was. As silently as I could, I slipped into it. The flashlight beam was just inches behind me. I kicked something soft. Hey! It was a man. He had been lying on the ground wrapped in a blanket. Hey, get out of here. This is my place, and I ain't got nothing for you to steal. I started to warn him, but one of the Hork-Bajar was there. The flashlight landed on the homeless man's face. He blinked like an owl. There was an alcove right behind me. I backed through. The homeless guy screamed. I heard the sound of a scuffle. Maybe the guy got away. I hope so. But I never found out because with the Hork-Bajir distracted, I ran. I ran and ran and ran. And as I ran, I really hoped it was all just a dream.